Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome aboard our special session today on the occasion of World Telecommunications and Information Society Day. Today is held as a special occasion to look at what's happening in terms of connectivity around the world. The theme for our session today is From Connectivity to Capability, Building Inclusive Digital Societies, is presented by us from Mixer.world, the Digital Empowerment Foundation, and the Center for Development of Public Policy. A big thanks to our sponsors, partners, and all of you for joining us today, and especially to our speakers, some of whom are joining us from various parts of the world in the middle of the night, late in the night, and so on. We have about 2 hours of outstanding sessions with around 10 speakers from different continents. We hope to make this an annual feature every day on the occasion of World Telecom and Information Society Day. But let's get started off today. We're going to begin our first segment with three speakers. Joining us now are Craig Polk, Senior Program Manager of the IEEE, Ashish Nainwal, Head of Marketing Global Service Delivery at Nokia Networks, and Sujit Nanda, Advisor to the Chairperson, Reliance Foundation. This will be the first segment titled Telecom Evolution and Social Inclusion. I'm going to request each of our speakers to make brief opening remarks, and then we can have a discussion where I ask a few questions, all of you can ask questions, and the speakers can ask questions of each other as well. So, without further ado, welcome aboard this special segment, and let me invite our first speaker, Craig Polk from the IEEE, to take over. Craig, over to you. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to invite you to take over. Welcome, everyone, and enjoy the show. Over to you, Craig. I think you're on mute. Sorry.
Yes, thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us from all over the world. I want to thank MXR for putting this together and all of the speakers and sponsors that are supporting this event. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what things are doing at the IEEE. First, a little bit about myself. My name is Craig Polk. I'm a senior program manager here at IEEE. I have more than 25 years of experience in the telecommunications sector, primarily working in Lucent Technologies and Nokia before I joined the nonprofit telecommunication space. I'm a senior member of IEEE, an Eta Kappa Nu alumni member, and a STEM outreach chair here in the United States. I have my Bachelor's of Engineering from Stevens Institute, my MSEE from Purdue University, and an MBA from William Patterson University. So I want to tell you a little bit about how IEEE is working in the evolution and convergence of telecom and digital sectors. One of the largest programs that we do in this area is called the CTU program, or Connecting the Unconnected. I have a link and a QR code up here where you can hear about some of the activities that we are doing for 2026. But first, I want to mention some of our program leadership, which as a nonprofit, we work very closely with a lot of volunteers and industry and academia. So I want to give a great note of support to our program leaders, Ashutosh Dutta, Sudhir Dixon, and Rulin Joe. They work with hundreds of volunteers across the whole world in this specific program. And what makes this program super unique is that it's open and inclusive to everyone all over the world. It touches in areas of bringing together different challenges, which we'll talk about in a minute. We converge people in different summits, and we continue our work in the community through networking. I'm going to share these in the chat later. There's some additional information of how you can see the activities that we've been involved in, specifically some of the aims that IEEE does to connect all of those people that are offline. So how does the telecom space come into this connecting the community? A lot of it goes through different standards. We've been working in this CTU program for several years. And what we found is that there is a large amount of global challenges. There is no shortage of challenges, and all of them are very specific and unique and local. So working through our great support of IEEE standards, we bring in different metrics and policies, and we're able to use these assets to provide local solutions. Um, a lot of this solutions through our standards really integrates into a village concept. You're going to see a video in a little bit about an activity that we did where we brought nine um, local communities together, where we did field validation, a lot of the products, and we had a big entrepreneurial focus on this with an aim to support people through empowering the community. So what does this mean from a global connectivity perspective? Well, we're really focusing on the evolution of how 6G is being able to bring inclusive standards and policy solutions in a local community, driving connectivity in a rural environment, since that is the last mile of connectivity that really needs to be solved. And the only way that you do that is bringing in the technology with the people. Without the people that are running these programs, these types of solutions aren't going to be possible. So mentoring is a huge key into here. And how we push these mentoring is through, I mentioned before, a lot of our programs and challenges since 2021. We've supported 91 programs over that time with over $300,000 in US prize distribution. And these distributions are broken mainly over two tracks, proof of concept and a concept only. And we focus on not only technology applications, but also business models and community enablement. On our website, you can learn about more of these amazing summits that we do every year across the 4 regions of the globe. And we have a great wealth of sponsors and supporters through the year. I won't mention all of these people that have supported us since 2021. You can find a lot more information on that on our website. Also on our website, you'll learn about these different empowering mentoring programs that we do through the years and how they actually bring impact to specific communities. One of our great high example stories is in India, the CR Bolo project, that have worked to provide support through not only new technologies, but old technologies such as FM radio. And one of the things I want to just showcase before I pass it over to the next speaker is about one of the programs that we've done locally in India and how we've been able to support that.
I'm going to Millie's house.
So we are trying to build something new or unique asset for IEEE that will help each and every person in the world to get access to hands-on. We don't have anything like that. Any student, anybody, any researcher, they like to upskill their skill set and try to understand what 5G is, what they're using, but they just don't know what it is.
ಈ ಕಾರ್ಯಕ್ರಮದ ಮುಖ್ಯ ಉದ್ದೇಶ ಗ್ರಾಮೀಣ ಭಾಗದಲ್ಲಿನ ಡಿಜಿಟಲ್ ಅಂತರವನ್ನ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡುವಂತಹ ನಿಟ್ಟಿನಲ್ಲಿ ಹಲವು ಪರಿಹಾರಗಳನ್ನು ಒದಗಿಸಲಾಗಿದೆ. ದಿನವಿಡೀ ನಡೆದಂತಹ ಕನೆಕ್ಟ್ ಭಾರತದ ಹಳ್ಳಿಗಳಿಗೆ 10 ನವೀನ ಪರಿಹಾರಗಳ ಪ್ರದರ್ಶನಗಳನ್ನ ಏರ್ಪಡಿಸಲಾಗಿತ್ತು. ಇದು ಗ್ರಾಮೀಣ ಡಿಜಿಟಲ್ ಅಂತರವನ್ನ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಮಾಡಲು ನೆರವಾಗಲಿದೆ.
Connectivity to the citizen for their better life and better e-governance is extremely important.
There may be in the high school, middle school, many colleges who do not have any access to the testbed. So we have built a 5G City Innovation Testbed, and that can be useful for the operators, vendors, research and application. So you can, for example, what we were doing here in the CTU, any specific technology like concept, we can build a proof of concept in this testbed. So this is open to anybody in the world. Even I know the kids in the back, they want to learn what 5G is, what 6G is.
So I'm just going to stop the video there for time. There's about an extra minute or so. But I, urge everyone to take a look at this video and learn more about what IEEE is doing. And we look forward to connecting with you in this space. Please reach out to us through our website or through this email, and I'd be happy to talk more with you and looking forward to chatting with the other members on this event. So back over to you, madam.
Thanks, Ashish. Thanks, Craig. And we move on to Ashish. Craig, I like the fact that you mentioned technology and business model and community engagement. And we're going to hear a lot about that also from our next speaker, Ashish Nengal from Nokia. Ashish, over to you. You can share your slides now if you wish, and we'll take Q&A after the next speaker, which is Sujit. So, Ashish, welcome aboard.
Sure, thank you. Hope you can see my slides.
Yeah, super.
Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Dr. Mohan, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you all. I'll be talking about the telecom evolution in India and the digital inclusion from an AI perspective, correct? So just to give you a perspective, let me minimize the screen. Yeah, okay. So last 30 years, we have seen a lot of transformation happening in India, correct? So this journey started in 1995, and interestingly, Nokia has been part of this journey because the first mobile call made in India was on 31st of July 1995, in which not only the handsets were from Nokia, but even the network was supplied from Nokia, correct? So that was 30 years back. Since then, we have seen a lot of transformation happening. In the end of 2025, we now have around 1.2 billion subscribers in India, correct? And we have seen a number of telecom providers starting from 4, going to 17, and now we have stable 4 operators in India. Bharti Airtel, Reliance Jio, Vodafone Idea, and BSNL, correct? So all in the last 30 years, we have seen a lot of transformation happening from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, correct? 2G, it was about voice, 3G was mobile internet, 4G was mobile broadband, 5G is basically low latency and ultra high speeds, correct? And so every year in Nokia, we do a analysis of the traffic in the network, and we release a report which is known as the Nokia Mbed report, which actually measures the India Mobile Broadband Index, correct? So 2 months back, we had released this for this year. And in that report, we saw that the monthly data traffic in India has crossed around 27 exabytes, which is 27 million GB, correct? And if you see this, what this means for the overall traffic per user, so this means that an average user is consuming around 31 GB every month. This is around 18 CAGR growth in the last 5 years, correct? And also India is shaping the global 5G story because now India is second across subscribers, data usage, and fixed wireless access only after China. And then we're also seeing that there's a shift towards the real-time, immersive, and autonomous systems, which will drive the need for a AI native network, correct? So this means that the network evolution is actually happening from connecting people to processing intelligence, right? Because the device ecosystem is rapidly changing. So not just handsets, there's a lot of variables which are there, IoT devices and robots and cars and modules and all, which means that with a lot of devices in the network, the AI in the device will increase the need for connectivity, both for the background syncing and for the real-time communication, correct? And then, of course, there are new use cases which are coming, whether it is latency critical compute or gaming experience, immersive experience, and 5G IoT with eRedCap and other things. So this means that there's a need for a resilient digital infrastructure supporting the scale, speed, and reliability the India's connected future demands, correct? So we see that, moving forward, what is happening is that demand is accelerating. The 5G capacity will have to scale through continuous layer addition within the existing network footprint, creating a denser and a more resilient network fabric, correct? Secondly, the growing availability of affordable 5G smartphones with integrated AI will have to be supported with real-time background syncing. Thirdly, driven by the surge in AI applications, the downlink to uplink traffic ratio will shift with the rise in uplink traffic, because a lot of people are uploading many things. Even they are uploading images and videos to AI and asking questions and generating AI outputs. Yeah. And then the shift from the traditional application to real-time, immersive, and autonomous systems will drive the need for AI native networks designed to handle far more data, far more intelligence, and far more complexity. Correct. So with that context, just to tell what we are doing as Nokia in India, right? So Nokia is a global connectivity leader for the AI era. We provide the critical network infrastructure the world relies on. So every day we are powering the telecom providers, which means the operators, as you call it, right? And the AI and cloud providers, the mission critical enterprise and defense, with advanced connectivity across fixed, mobile, and transport networks, delivering the performance and security they need to meet the demands of an AI-enabled future. And we are talking about like 4 operators in India. So globally, we are supporting 1,500 plus operators, telecom providers, customers worldwide, correct? Which means that 4.4 billion mobile subscriptions are supported by Nokia networks globally, correct? Also, 15 out of 20 top global economies' fastest 5G networks are using the Nokia radio network. And when we talk about hyperscalers, so 9 of the top 10 global hyperscalers are using Nokia optical networks, right? And then of course we have this 26,000 plus patent families, and no surprise, we have 10 Nobel Prizes for breakthrough inventions. So when we talk about digital inclusion, so whatever we are providing to the operators, so they are basically in turn providing all these services, the rural services to the villages and all, the connectivity services and all. But besides that, on a CSR front, we are also running an initiative which is called as a Smart Poor initiative. So in this, I mean, there are multiple digital inclusion programs which are there, but Smart Poor is the flagship one, in which we are building a digital village ecosystem project, where we are connecting the unconnected, which means that we have around 205 smart port centers in 11 states, where we are basically having volunteers who are basically using those centers to help the villages in the field of healthcare, in the field of governance and education and like that, right? So that was the digital inclusion part. And when we talk about the future, so when we are seeing this AI super cycle, which is there, needing the advanced connectivity. So we are, number one, powering growth in the AI and cloud area with high performance network infrastructure. Secondly, when it comes to connectivity, we are leading the next era of connectivity with AI native networks and 6G. And then, we are also commercializing the technology innovation powered by our Nokia Bell Labs, so that we work with the ecosystem partners, so that, for India, we are able to provide this very resilient infrastructure, which is needed for India's digital growth. Yeah. So that was from my side. For any questions, I will be willing to answer after the session.
Thanks, Ashish. We will have time for Q&A after that. But thanks so much for taking us through the very first phone call made in India on a mobile phone. Unbelievable. Many of us didn't know it was on a Nokia phone and a Nokia network at the same time. And from there to where we are today in this Zoom call happening right now, connecting us from 3, 4 different continents. And by the way, this whole thing is being recorded and it's also being streamed now live on YouTube. We'll share that link with you afterwards, so you can share the link of this whole session with other people. So thanks, Ashish, again for covering everything from AI native networks to the Smart Poor initiative. That's a very broad spectrum of activities that Nokia is supporting. supporting. Thanks so much. Let's turn to our next speaker now and then do Q&A for everyone. I want to invite Suchit Nanda to take the floor next. Suchit is also one of the pioneers of many of the networking movements within India, starting from the bulletin board systems. But let's hand it over to Suchit now. Suchit, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madan. First of all, thank you, all of you, for having me here. It's so great to be part of this discussion. I'm happy to see friends like Madan Mohan, Osama, Chetal, Shalini, and a whole bunch of people who are going back decades in terms of what our journey has been. Since Craig touched about the IEEE and the technical standards, and Ashish looked at the network infrastructure, let me take a triangulated position on the human element of it, the content, the media evolution, the grassroots capabilities. Just as a bit of background, as Madan said, I've been one of the early people who were involved with the BBS revolution, which brought BBS to India, then the FidoNet. I've been part of the APC network, UNDP, Orbicom, APNIC Foundation, and led on to looking at what were the challenges which were faced by India in terms of getting onto the internet. So we got into building a set-top box, brought internet to TV, and a whole journey which led me to Reliance Foundation. Reliance Foundation, like all things Reliance does in terms of depth and scale, is super important for Reliance. And so Reliance Foundation was created in August 2010 with the idea of looking at all the big challenges that India faces, be it rural development, education, health, arts and culture, urban development, the things that India faces that can be addressed by looking at NGO or a philanthropic organization perspective. I've had the privilege to work closely with Mrs. Neeta Ambani and Sri Mukesh Ambani and create a framework for Reliance Foundation. And now we have Geo Institute and collaborations with other foundations which has taken the work forward. If we look at it from the past perspective, we see a number of big changes and waves that have come about. I'm not talking about just the industrial revolution and the steam engine. I'm talking about the radios, which was the first mass voice broadcast service, 1900s. That was being used for both positive as well as maybe rousing up a nation for war. Television was the next visual interface that brought about a massive change in the way we interfaced and worked with. And then came the internet revolution, ARPANET to WWW, which was from dial up to broadband and now wireless. We then came into a phase for mobiles. The mobiles were personalized computing era where we could have a huge amount of computing power, and that changed the way we started taking pictures, videos, and all of that. And now we are currently in the phase of AI intelligence, the cognitive engine. Each wave of change brought about an opportunity and challenge with an underlying technological revolution and advancement, but basically trying to connect the people. And I look at it from a lens of saying it's three V's of inclusion. That's voice, video, and vernacular. And why include vernacular will be pretty obvious soon. So if you look back, if there's one single company that changed the landscape of digital and mobile India, it was Reliance. Before Reliance Jio launched in September 2016, India was ranked 155th in the world for mobile broadband data consumption. And just in a short period of 180 days of launch of Jio, it made India the number one data consumer. To put this in perspective, within 2 years, India surpassed both the United States and China combined in the mobile data usage. And this disruption didn't change just the ranking metrics. It fundamentally laid the groundwork for India's digital economy, paving the way for massive boom in digital payments, streaming platforms, and online startups. And this came in super useful during the time of COVID as well. We're now in the shift from telco to techno to digico, the end-to-end digital ecosystem, which covers finance, entertainment, shopping, and healthcare. We've heard of things like Geo Air Fiber and Neo satellite services coming in. But yet, when you look at it, we sit in a strange paradoxical situation. India has the world's cheapest data, around $0.15 per GB, and some of the highest data consumptions rates, as I mentioned. And yet, the segment of population still remains digitally invisible. The Indian paradox isn't about the pipe or the connectivity, but the purpose or the capability. So I look at it that there are three key things about it. There's a language barrier. 90% of Indians don't speak English, and yet a vast majority of useful web content, be it legal, financial, end to end education, is quite English centric, and that needs to change. Then there's a user gap. The user gap is that millions have 4G and 5G phones, but only use them for YouTube entertainment or just a chat between each others because they lack the digital literacy of using it for banking and government services. Uh, then there is the functional literacy versus digital literacy. Being able to swipe is not the same thing as being able to safely navigate a digital economy. So the question always is, how do we ensure that these developments that we're talking about are equitable? How do we ensure that these changes are inclusive and reach the marginalized? And we do not create digital haves and have nots. How do we cross the language barrier? When government forms, legal documents, knowledge bases are locked in behind a particular language. After all, 90% of the people don't speak English. So, how do we get that across? And AI is going to play a big role in this. How do we ensure that the northern or the western biases don't overly influence generations of youth, since much of the cutting edge technology comes from there? And we've seen that in terms of the movies and the AI biases that we talk about. And also, how do we bring about this technology without adversely impacting on climate change and global warming and all of those issues, which is also very super important for us. After all, we're talking about over a billion people who are going to be using and applying this technology in day to day life. And how do we ensure gender parity, address the rural urban divide? How do we shape the youth and the future of India? And how do we ensure that we don't lose spoken written language, our arts and culture, and heritage and pride, and where we come from? We want to flatten access in a sense, but not the content side of it. And that's going to be super important. So, how do we ensure data is secure, sovereign, and yet accessible for the greater good? And how do we do it locally and at local costs with resource crunches? We've seen the situation with oil and power and all of that around us. So, would frugal technology be the answer? So applying the more from less for more framework of my dear friends, Dr. R.A. Mashelkar, his philosophy along with the book of another dear friend, Sushil Bode, is that the answer for us? So India has mastered the first two parts of this equation, delivering more infrastructure from less cost. We have examples of ISRO, we've got Mars mission, we've got low cost, high speed connectivity and access to mobiles. And yet, the challenge of this decade is that the final part, for more, how do we convert the world's cheapest data into the world's most equitable society? And that impact of what India does is going to be felt globally. I'll stop with this and come back again with a few more points. Thanks, Madan.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sujit. Thanks, Ashish. Thanks, Greg, for all your opening remarks. I mean, this has been a mini masterclass in evolution of networks and social impact. I want to ask each of you one question, which is, what is the one single most important lever you think in moving the needle towards creating more social inclusion? How to increase more people getting access to affordable internet, mobile, etc. What is the one single most important lever? Let's start with you, Sujit, since you're the most recent speaker.
So I think what we need to do is look at how do we get education across to the global south. Ideally, what we need to do is make sure that the educational component uh, is built into every aspect of it. Right now, what we've seen is an intrusion of technology coming in where people have used it for whatever they was the low hanging fruit, whether it was entertainment or whether it was chat with each other or a voice call. Those are great examples. If you have somebody who's serving as a watchman at some place and he's able to connect to his family back home, or if he's able to transfer funds in a simple swipe using UPI, these are great utilization aspects of it. But yet there is a big gap of how do you holistically use this technology. And what's going to happen is this intrusion of technology is going to happen all the time because the technology is getting embedded into every aspect of life. So unless there's a greater understanding, you're also going to get the opposite side of technology coming in. You're going to be facing data breaches, people not understanding. We've got this huge, massive problem of digital arrest, of house arrest. Those are social problems. They're social engineering issues, but they're coming with a layer of technology. So unless we look at that aspect, we will be looking at a very lopsided development.
Thanks, Sujit. Digital literacy education across the board is a very important lever. Ashish, what do you think is the most important lever to move?
Yes, again, we are talking about 5G, adoption and all. So unless there are some use cases for 5G which are in the education and healthcare domain, I think that is something which will make the actual impact when we talk about social inclusion.
Got it. How about you, Craig? As IEEE, what would you think is the best way to make more inclusive?
Yeah, well, we've already heard about education, and that's a great driving factor. And one of the things that we see is really this grassroots development, where having all of this technology and allowing people to know what it is, but you really need to bring the communities together and hear from the local people on how they want the technology to support them. And when you get their support and involvement, we see that things in the policy area and the actual deployment and adoption of this technology moves at a much greater space and pacing when the local people that want the end technology are very heavily involved.
Great, thanks. Anyone else have a question, or do you guys want to ask each other questions, the panelists to each other, or anyone in the audience, any one of the other panelists? There's a chance to jump in with a couple of quick questions if you have. We're almost ready for our next segment, but we can take one more question or comment. Osama or
Yeah,
Shalini?
I have a question with Nokia being the household name in early era when everybody used to rely on mobile phones, and also for IE for technology standards, and also for Suchit. What is one regret that you feel that you could technology could have done better for inclusion?
Yeah, going back in time, what could you have done? What could the industry have done maybe to make
Yeah,
things
and
better?
I'll just explain. The reason I say is that we are every time we come with 1G, 2G, 3G, we see that this will be the final frontier of connecting everyone, and at the same time, when we are connected with the higher level of connectivity, the technologies say that the earlier device will not work, with the newer technology. So that means constantly for business purpose, while you are inventing technology to include, you are excluding people who cannot use with that speed.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
technology.
that's a good.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
So
anyone want to jump in?
let
Craig,
me
you can jump in as well.
maybe I can take this.
Yeah.
The key thing is that we've been looking at technology from a pure play technological point of view. We've never looked at it saying that here is a requirement that we need to address, and then what's the best technology that fits it. It's normally the other way around. It's like, this is the latest technology, the world is using it, we should be using it, and then how do we fit this into the environment? And that typically always fails. Because what happens at the grassroots and where we're talking about, and Osama's right about it, if I go with the latest phone, the person at the other end is looking at the cost benefit and he's like, why should I pay more for this and what does it do for me? The, actually, we should be put the other way around. It should be looked at like what technology can play a role, and then how do we build that across for them? And they need to be part of that exercise of building that technology. So simply going from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G and now 6G is not going to drastically change anything. Yeah, you're going to get better latency responses, you're going to get faster videos. Some services will come which were not possible earlier, but it doesn't change the fundamental shift. And I can validate this with the point of view that if you look at Reliance numbers, which started with 4G and now there's 5G, but nearly half of the people, I believe, are still on the 4G platform. So there is not enough incentive to move to the 5G. And why would they move to the 6G? So there's going to be a very thin segment that looks at the differential aspects of it. So that's the reason why when we were looking at Reliance Foundation, for example, we looked at the problem statement. We looked at what are the challenges India is facing. We didn't look at it from the point of view of saying, here's the technology, how do I fit it in? What can I bring this technology to the rural areas? That didn't help. What we looked at was connectivity is a problem. So we did the connectivity aspect first. But then today, the reach of Reliance Foundation is massive. We reach out to 36 states, 98,000 villages across India, impacting 97 million lives. And last month, we had some relationships with CDAC. We set up some programs where we have eSafe Her. We had programs with ORF, which looked at a decade of work done in the rural area and what are the lessons learned from it. So none of this was built around the technology angle perspective. However, whatever technology you have, you got to better utilize it. So we had things like, YouTube Live being done. We have 10 languages supported and nearly 1.5 crore people access that. But it didn't start with that. So just to give you an answer, Osama, in a different sense, when we started out, we used SMS. We used voice because that was the only way to reach out. And then we found challenges there. People, if you send an SMS, didn't have literacy rate. So how do you reach a message to somebody and say, here's a cyclone coming? And then you need to use visual means to do that. Now it's come on a long way from there. So then we moved from voice to IVRS, then to WhatsApp messaging, then to YouTube Live, and now we have apps. There's like a fisherman app. There are apps for agriculture. And the world has also progressed, right? So it's not just a technology change. So I agree with him that if it's just a move from 2G to 4G to 5G to 6G or XG, that really won't make a fundamental change unless we study the problem.
Ashish, any take on that? Technology, obsolescence, evolution?
No, absolutely. Fully agreed. Fully agreed on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an amazing point. And, from an engineering perspective, one of the things we always try to go back to is we talk about engineering being like, what type of water are you going to fill in a device? And a lot of times we focus so much on making the technology first and not having that killer app that's actually going to support it, right? Like what's actually going to go inside this technology that we create. And I think having a pushback more for looking at what is actually needed first instead of trying to do it the other way around between people and enterprise is really how you're going to see impact going in local areas.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Ashish. Thanks, Suchit.
Madan, just one quick point to add to that. One of the things that we're seeing with AI coming up is a lot of people are saying there are three things which are not there. We don't have enough power, we don't have enough water, we don't have any physical infrastructure. So I think that needs to be addressed as well. That's a big issue in the thing. So that's why anybody going big way and saying, I'm setting up a data center where you're going to get all these three things. So that's why an approach which a large organization like Reliance can take is that we've set up one of the largest solar power panel structure, which is going to pump power enough to the extent that it's more than what we need right now. Water needs to be not pulled out from the bore wells and to the rivers that we have, because that anyway is going to be a challenge going forward. So we're looking at using saline water and doing a desalination plant and then using that water. So I think these are the issues that are going to come up. So let's stop measuring the success of telecom evolution by just the number of petabytes running through our networks or the number of SIM cards sold or the connections that are there. Instead, let us measure it by outcomes. How are the lives impacted? What did the technology do for us? The number of livelihoods secured, the number of health crises averted, and the measurable human potential that we could unlock. Unless we look at it from that point of view, technology will be just merely a tool. We need to enable end-to-end benefits at a scale, inclusively, impactfully, and with a lasting change.
Thanks, Suchit. I think one message coming very clearly from segment one has been the importance of people and community factors to look at the evolution of technology and its impact. You also mentioned environment. We at Mixer are organizing another similar global virtual dialogue on the occasion of World Environment Day, which is June 5th. We're taking a look at the environmental impacts of digital and how to mitigate some of those. But that's for another occasion. But thanks again to all our speakers from segment one, Craig, Ashish, and Suchit. We now move on to segment two, and let me invite our next speakers to get ready. We're going to have three speakers in this segment talking on one of the themes which was mentioned already in the first segment, which is community and empowerment. So segment two talks about access, empowerment, and entrepreneurship, and we have three speakers over here: Osama Manzar from the Digital Empowerment Foundation, Andrea Esterhuizen from the Association for Progressive Communications, based in South Africa now, and Amirullah Khan, Research Director of the Center for Development of Public Policy and a member of the Telangana State Public Service Commission. Let's begin with Osama now, followed by Andrea and Amir. Osama, the floor is yours.
But then we have 5 minutes or?
Yeah, about 5-ish minutes for each, and then the Q&A at the end.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. I don't know whether we need to talk in such a way that today is a day of celebration or a day of introspection or a day of review of how we have done in the last 30 years, considering that it is also about information society. I would like to highlight 3-4 points, giving mostly the examples from India. Also because India is one of the largest users of internet. India is also one of the largest excluded from internet in the world. And there is all kind of user cases that happens here, apart from many other global South countries. I just wanted to quickly bring in that most of the time when we are celebrating and talking about inclusion and everything, we talk about what numbers we have achieved. The progress of connectivity, the progress of people who have got a smartphone, the progress of people who have started using online payment, the number of people who started using e-commerce, the number of people who have villages have started, being included online, and so on and so forth. Before this discussion, I just thought that let me do the reverse and ask that question to the statistician and Google search. And I asked that how many people in India are still using dumb phones, and the number it says is 222 million. And this is the number of people who are part of the connectivity, who are using dumb phones. Dumb phones means feature phones. I would say it is a pre-early 2000 era phones, now hardly used unless you can't afford a smartphone. Then I also asked that how many people have a smartphone in India, and it went up to 650 million people are using a smartphone in India. And I asked that how many of them are from rural India who are not using smartphones. Rural India's population is about 915 million, and 53% of rural India is still not using a smartphone. Then I asked another question that how many people are not using internet at all. And it says that 45% of Indian population is offline. 45%. Which actually contradict the number when we say that according to the TRAI, there are 1.2 billion subscription of internet. Actually, that is not 102 billion subscription. It is the number of SIM cards that has been sold. And there is always a possibility that a telecenter or a tele service providers might be buying 100,000 SIMs to do an operation of serving people and so on and so forth. And many people are using number of multiple SIMs. Many SIMs which are discarded is not consolidated by saying that how many are used or not used. So it's very interesting that when we are using the numbers, that how we are using the numbers. Then I also asked the question that how many women do not use internet? And there are 67% of women in India have never used internet. 67% of the 50% of the population have never used internet in India. And we are talking about equity and equitability. We also asked, because UPI is one of the digital public infrastructure, which is a part of the major telecom service and infrastructure. And I asked the question that how many people do not use UPI, still do not use UPI. And more than 40% of rural population is still not using UPI, which is considered to be the most fastest, easiest, cheapest way of making transactions online. Then I asked the question that how many people, how many schools in rural India have internet connectivity? And the data says, and it's a government data, says that 80% of schools of rural India, about 1.06 million, do not have internet connectivity. And we are talking about the future generation, preparing for future generation. Then I also asked that what is the use of internet, or the how many public health centers have internet connectivity. And it says 80% of public health centers do not have electronic medical record in India. And so it's very interesting that, but having said that, I'm not saying that anybody who is saying that we have a good growth and we were using 1 million, then 2 million, then 20 million, then 100 million. The point is that that graph is always increasing. But the point is that what about the graph that is still not connected, whose life is dependent on connectivity, and whose life is still paying more for every service, which has been said that it is only digital, only policy based. For example, I cannot have my food, access to food, without authentication, online authentication of my digital identity. That means my life is dependent on digital. And there are many more things, So today, you can't withdraw your own money from the bank unless you have a bank account and you are digitally connected and digitally integrated according to the laws of the land. So it's very interesting that how we are taking for granted that connectivity is pervasive. Also taking for granted that policies that we are making has to be digital only policy and there is no alternative, and still not realizing that the larger population is still not meaningfully connected. And that's the purpose of today's introspection. And that is what I wanted to highlight in this initial discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Osama. We've come a long way, definitely, but we've got even further to go when you want to talk about bringing the fruits of this technology to a broader population. To bring us to a global view on this technology change, I want to invite Andriette Esterhuizen from APC to share with us some of her views, being at the center of the perfect storm around the world for digital access. Andriette, over to you.
Thanks, Madan. So I'm based here in South Africa. I used to be executive director of Association for Progressive Communications, but now I work for APC as a consultant, and currently primarily in access and in enabling local access, working with community-based connectivity initiatives. And Osama and I did not plan our interventions, but actually we might as well have, because Osama, you made exactly the points I wanted to raise. I think broadly, this is World Telecommunications Day, so I'll start with telecoms terms. I think we have to always remember that the challenge of digital inclusion exists at primarily two levels, not only, but there really is still a massive supply challenge. At the supply level, the availability of affordable infrastructure and services remains a challenge. And I think Osama has outlined how deceptive a lot of the stats can be, and I'll say more about that later. But there is also a demand challenge, in telecom sense terms. The demand side issues are issues of access to content, relevant services, safety and security, meaningful value that people actually get from being connected. And unless we continue to work on both those levels, we're not going to change this paradigm of where there's increased availability and innovation, faster spectrum, but more and more exclusion at the same time. The changes in exclusion, but exclusion as a massive challenge doesn't actually reduce. And I'm going to speak primarily from an African context, which is where I do most of my work. And I think it was Suchet that said that India has of the cheapest data in the world, and that's absolutely true. And the average cost of data in India is almost 40 times cheaper than the average cost in sub-Saharan Africa. So keep that in mind as well. And I think that's part of this backdrop. I think the backdrop to this challenge, and a backdrop that is our enemy, is that there is still a digital development narrative. There's a narrative that prevails. It's the mainstream status quo narrative. And that is that the problem can be addressed by having grand solutions, and that big mobile operators are primarily the solution. And that certainly is the narrative in Africa. And every policymaker thinks that if you want to provide digital inclusion, work with MNOs. And MNOs have the solution, and all we need to do is to give them more spectrum. They might reduce the cost of data, but ultimately they are the solution. And unless we change that narrative, we're not actually going to change the scope and scale of digital inequality. And another part of the sort of backdrop, and Osama has addressed that already, is the sort of deceptive statistics that we have to work with. Now, generally, the International Telecommunications Union's internet penetration statistics, they sometimes take a while to come out, but they're very reliable. But are you aware that how the ITU assesses and counts internet penetration is someone that's connected once in a 3-month period to the internet? In other words, ITU, internet penetration stats, gives the same statistical relevance to a farmer in rural Nigeria that connects once in a 3-month period to a hyper-connected coder somewhere in Hyderabad or in Silicon Valley. And unless we change that, we're not actually going to get to a point where the seriousness of the digital exclusion problem is recognized. The other thing is the storytelling component of it. You know, I always go to the World Summit on the Information Society Forum. And you see lots of videos of happy people in villages with their mobile phones, selling their agricultural produce, you know, having access to market data. You very rarely see videos or hear stories of the impact on the lives of people who are not connected. So I think that's another part of our challenge. We have to surface, we have to make more visible the cost of inequality, of digital inequality. And I think, Osama, you've said that really better than I could have. So how do we respond to this? I think the first thing I think we have to recognize is that we don't just need more of the same. It's not just a case of more faster spectrum for MNOs. We need to diversify how we think of solutions. We need more and service smaller, and smaller and medium-sized service providers. We need a mix of different business models. We need skill building, content development, and we need to think of business models that provide that, business models that mix demand side and supply side intervention. We need to connect our local business development and community building activity with our digital inclusion activity, with the provision of services. We need to look at public access, access in schools, along with creating local service solutions. And I think primarily we need to also look at partnerships that are not just at the big picture, big operator, big institutional level, but partnerships that involve communities and that involve different actors, from small businesses to local government to local community organizations, and and we need to draw them into this process of trying to diffuse access to ICTs. So just to summarize this, I think we can try and we should think of working for digital inclusion at three primary levels. Firstly, at a macro level, that's the level of the narrative, the level of the policy, regulation, and financing that's available for investment in digital inclusion. We need to have regulation that diversify access markets. We need licensing frameworks that make it easier for small and medium-sized operators to enter the market. We need to not just rely on MNOs or even on virtual MNOs. We need to look at access in schools and public access as well. I think this also involves standard. I mean, Craig talked about the importance of standards. There's an initiative, for example, at the moment led by the Internet Society to adopt open fiber standards. Now, this will be incredibly useful because if every regulator in the world, every telecoms regulator, adopts the same standard for documenting and mapping where there's fiber optic cable, it becomes much easier for other operators and small and community-based operators to know where that fiber is and to access it. So standards are also a very important part of creating this more enabling environment. Secondly, at the innovation level, and I think here it's about tech innovation, and I think the first panel talked a lot about that. But it's also about business model innovation. And it's also about development. How do we think about sustainable development? For example, how do we think about devices and changing how we innovate devices and build devices that could, for example, be repaired and upgraded more easily as opposed to just becoming electronic waste? We also need innovation in how we use spectrum. I'm very proud to say that in South Africa, our regulator last year has made it possible to use white space spectrum, the whole 3,800, 4,200 megahertz range and other ranges of frequency are now available for experimentation by anyone. This is also important to build more tech innovation. And then thirdly, at the level of communities themselves, I think that's where we need partnerships that are not just involving communities, but that are actually driven by communities, where they're able to define what their ICT challenges and needs are on their own terms. It involves working with local government, with local business owners. I think Suchit mentioned arts and culture and heritage. The whole creative sector needs to be part of this as well. So that we approach digital inclusion not just at the level of creating more handset owners or more consumers, but that actually empowers people to adopt, use, and develop ICTs on their own terms. And I think this involves a kind of skill building that needs to be future oriented. If we want to reverse this game of constant catch up, which is normally a losing game, we need to approach digital inclusion in a way that builds the capacity of individuals and communities to not just adopt and benefit from ICTs as they are today, but as they are evolving in the future. And for example, the AI challenge. Why are we all talking about the challenges of AI? Because we weren't thinking about it 20 years ago, even though it was around 20 years ago. So I think that kind of future-oriented local capacity development has to be part of a model that reverses this growing digital inequality. Even though it changes shape, it's not getting any smaller. Madan, back to you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. You set the stage very well for our last segment on collaboration in ecosystems, as well as for our next speaker, Amirullah Khan from the Center for Development of Public Policy. Amir, you heard a lot of very good recommendations just now from the policy point of view at the macro, meso, micro level, and so on. Amir, what's your take on policy and ICTs and inclusion? Amir. I just saw him a while ago with us. Do we have Amir? Yeah, Amir, can you put on your...
Yes, Madan, can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yes, yes. Go ahead, go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks. Sorry for the lack of the video.
No worries, no worries.
I'm not looking at my best in any case. So yeah. So thanks, Madan. This is a important discussion on an important day, and what I remember is how 40 years ago when we got into the telecom engineering sector, the idea was that we are going to soon see convergence and how it is going to be a sector that is going to work for the poor. But it's been 40 years now, and if you all heard Osama's numbers, we see how much telecom, while it has really revolutionized the world in every sense, has also been a very significant tool for increasing inequalities. And that's what was the point that I was making, that what's happening with some of us in the government who are more and more using the telecom infrastructure to provide public services are realizing that those who are left out now are significant in numbers, and that is happening because of this tendency of ours to make digital exclusive, that to make access to public service exclusive to those who are on the digital bandwidth. And that what that is causing is that it is leaving out at least a third of the population. And obviously, it's a very simple issue to talk about, that those 30% are those who need the public services the most. Let me give you my specific example. I run the recruiting arm of the province that I live in, and we recruit thousands of people into the state bureaucracy. Now, these are people who, from various parts of the state, work hard, study hard to write competitive exams that would enable them to join the bureaucracy. What is happening is that as we take this examination across the state and move from the conventional methods to computer-based methods of writing exams, of online application, we realize how difficult it is for a large number of people who are excluded to even participate in the exercise, in the sense that the digital access is patchy, and therefore you need to spend at least 5 times the amount that somebody in a big city would spend in applying. Uh, those who apply rely on third-party providers who are themselves very poorly educated, and so they make a number of mistakes. And those mistakes can be in a sense fatal, because if someone is misspelled your name or miswritten the dates of birth, then even if the person has done well in the exam, it is quite likely that he or she gets disqualified. So it's becoming a serious issue, this inability of ours to provide multiple methods to people who are accessing physical public service. It's important to do that using technology, but it's very important also to provide alternate methods. The other aspect that is really becoming an emergency situation is access to healthcare. And as we are beginning to look at technology to provide diagnostics, to provide outpatient care, we are beginning to rely more and more on the telecom lines, and that is something that is always so uncertain. And in the health sector, it becomes even more critical because those who are looking for healthcare are also looking for a doctor's physical presence, physical touch, feel, counseling, and that goes missing. So it's a moot point really as to whether access to healthcare is increasing, is becoming better with technology or not. There is no gainsaying the point. There is no denying the point that technology has made things very, very much easier, has brought down costs significantly, has enabled us to reach areas that would have been unthinkable a few years ago, has allowed us to collect data that's so very important for taking healthcare across the country. But it is also a fact that a significant proportion of the population uh, gets denied. I said public services and public recruitment and healthcare, but one can talk about every public good where technology and overuse of technology or an overbearance of technology can result in significant numbers being denied access. So that's the point that I wanted to make, Madan. Thanks so much.
Yeah, great. Thanks. We have just maybe one last question we can squeeze in here before we go to the next segment. I can see a lot of activity in the chat window with a lot of sharing of links and so on. Anyone want to jump in with their question? Otherwise, I've got a question to wrap up this segment. Anyone want to jump in? Feel free to raise your hand or type it in the chat window, and one of my colleagues can unmute you. Or otherwise, my question for the panel is, what is your one main recommendation to improve collaboration in this ecosystem? We've heard about a telecom perspective, we heard about entrepreneurship, we heard about education, and we just talked about health. What is the one single
Madan, could I jump in?
I think Madani's should you start, Andrew.
Yeah, I think he's just frozen. I think for me it is to look at the solution having being one that involves diversification. I think, and I'm speaking here from the African perspective, there's a grand narrative that just giving mobile operators more spectrum is going to fix the problem. We have to abandon that. We have to solve the problem from the bottom up, as Suchis was saying in the chat, and that involves diversifying the opportunities, the interventions, the access provision solutions, and the community development and social justice solutions. We're never going to fix this if we think it's just a case of throwing more tech and faster connectivity at the problem. We have to start from the bottom up, and we have to have a framework of financing, opportunity, and policy and regulation that actually lets people connect themselves. It's not just a case of of governments and businesses and big businesses. They're part of the solution. But unless communities are driving connectivity in ways that are meaningful for them, we're not really going to change the paradigm.
Great. Amir, any concluding parts for this section?
Can I make a point?
Yeah, Osama, go ahead. Yeah.
So one thing I wanted to also highlight is that there is a policy paralysis in making digital as a policy. For example, I was just looking at how much government and private sector is pushing for digital public infrastructure. Now, digital public infrastructure is one of the policies that most of the countries are adopting, as if that the digital public infrastructure will solve all the problem, right? But the same digital public infrastructure discussion is not having any discussion around, first, digital public infrastructure should provide digital infrastructure to the public offices, or a public sector services oriented infrastructure. For example, public health, for example, public education, for example, schools, for example, financial infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So there is a parallel process happens when you make digital policies. Digital policies is seen as if that either the technologist will decide or the technology ministry will decide, but not really the user-based ministries or user-based or a sector-based entities will decide. And that is where the I would say interoperability of policy making is extremely important when we are thinking of making greater impact out of connectivity and digital infrastructure.
Thanks, Osama. We now need to move on to our next segment. Let me now invite our next three speakers to get ready. Chetan Kapoor, Sonia George, and Shalini Kala. We're going to talk now about many of the points raised in our segment just now, which was on the importance of ecosystem collaboration, interoperability, and so on. Our first speaker is going to be Chetan Kapoor from the Tech Mahindra Foundation, talking more about access for the people with different abilities. Sonia is joining us from Boston, talking about what's happening with the Global Digital Inclusion Partnership. And we're going to end with Shalini, who I believe is joining us now from China, to talk about some of the rural aspects of collaboration and what's happening at a multilateral level. So let's begin with Chetan Kapoor. Chetan, the floor is yours. Let's hear what you have to say from a Tech Mahindra Foundation. Chetan?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Badran, and thanks, Sama, as well. Here, just wonderful in listening to some of the very erudite speakers that have spoken before me. I represent Tech Mahindra Foundation. Tech Mahindra Foundation is the corporate social responsibility arm of Tech Mahindra, the largest IT companies in India. Foundation has been working for over 20 years now with the broad mission of empowerment through education. We work essentially on two core themes, education and employability. We are in urban organizations, work in about 20 major cities of India. And within this, one of the most important cross-cutting themes for us is support persons with disability. In fact, in the years ahead, we are going to deepen our focus around support of persons with disabilities, because as we've gone about working in this space, we've realized the huge need, the humongous need to support persons with disabilities. We're talking about technology and inclusion today, and I think if there is one segment of the population which can disproportionately benefit technology, it is persons with disabilities. And we've spoken about statistics and numbers here. When it comes to estimating the number of persons with disabilities, there is a lot of ambiguity as far as data is concerned. The last census that had happened in India back in 2011 put the percentage of persons with disabilities at just about over 2%, whereas another statistic which we got from the World Health Organization sometime around 2023 mentioned that at any given point in time, at least 15% of the world's population suffers from some kind of a disability or the other. So, more recent estimates from the government have put the number of persons with disabilities in India to anywhere between 70 to 80 million people. 80 million is about the population of Germany. So you can imagine the extent of the challenge that we are talking about. And as we've gone about looking at this challenge more and more, we realized the complexity and the nuances of tackling the challenges for this population. Because while we tend to bucket persons with disabilities in this three-word phrase, but if you unpack it, you realize that there are so many different kinds of disabilities, each of them requiring different kinds of solutions. And also, you need to look at disability through a life stage approach, which means that you have to start by ensuring that the identification of disability happens at the right time. And then you have to make sure that the early intervention, special education, therapy, as the person grows older, access to livelihoods, and most importantly, access to a dignified life is something which we are all working towards. So, looking at this challenge, one of the things that came our way very obviously was, and this, in fact, if you go back just about 5 years when we were grappling with COVID, and we would all remember what the lockdown had done to us. At that time, when we looked at our communities where we served persons with disabilities, we realized that those were obviously among the hardest hit. I'm talking about lower income communities. Within that, when we looked at the speech and hearing impaired, for example, we realized that the technology tools that we had tried to provide them, to towards the pivot that had happened towards technology. I mean, a lot of them were not of any use to the speech and hearing impaired. And similarly, for the visually impaired, the visual content that we had provided to them to help them with education was obviously not of much use. So that is where we realized that there needs to be a greater focus, a greater thrust towards provision of assistive technology. And also towards, now when we look at assistive technology, it's very interesting. I was just uh, I came across this statistic that the global market size assistive technology is about 31 billion US dollars, of which India's contribution is just about 2% at about 700 million. So that's the kind of gap, knowing that India has almost about 18% of the world's population. This statistic by itself tells you how underrepresented India is when it comes to provision of assistive technology to persons with disabilities. So there are three clear challenges when it comes to assistive technology in India. One of course is awareness. Most people, even those who we work with in the cities of India, are not even aware that there could be solutions in the assistive technology space which can help them, tide over the challenge that they're facing. Second is adoption. So even if you are aware, but how do you really adopt to it? You have to, it would require some mindset, etc. So adoption continues to be a challenge for which we know that a lot of training and support is required. And third, of course, is affordability, because we know that assistive technology, a lot of is still, I would say, at an early stage of innovation and development is still pretty expensive, and therefore not affordable to a very large segment of the population. So given this, and whatever that I'm seeing, in terms of solutions is not just confined to technology, but solutions for persons with disabilities and their caregivers in general. So with that landscape, what we at Tech Mahindra Foundation started working on a couple of years back, and have now very recently given it some shape. And I'm going to share my screen now for to show a few slides to you. So if I can just share my screen.
Yeah, we'll
Uh,
give you shared access. Yes.
Yes, so here it is. There is this solution is called the Ability Network, as you can see on my screen, which we started working on, as I said, years ago. And the whole idea is that the challenge of persons with disabilities or PWD exclusion, as I've just mentioned, is a very real challenge which we grapple with. We look at it as a missed opportunity, and the numbers that I've just shared are there in front of you. In terms of exclusion, when it comes to the non-disabled, you can see that while about 80% of people have access to education, when it comes to persons with disabilities, the number drops to about 50%. Similarly, in healthcare, almost 50% cannot afford critical healthcare when it comes to persons with disabilities. You look at livelihoods, you look at elderly, you have similar challenges. So that is where the idea of the ability network came in, which is that we know that there are lots of solutions do exist. Lot of them are emerging. So the idea behind the ability network is to address these challenges by creating an inclusive network of potentially all relevant stakeholders, solution providers, NGOs, assistive technology enablers, the government, and the PWDs themselves. So what you have are the solution seekers on the one side, which includes persons with disabilities and their caregivers, and on the other hand, the solution providers, which what we just mentioned. So the idea is to get them all together onto one platform, which is what the Ability Network is. The website is here. You can also scan the QR code if you have your mobile phones close to you to actually visit the TAN website, which went live a few months ago. Let me see if I can quickly show you the site. So this is the site. I think you can see the site now. What we've been doing over here is uh, to have solution providers. So all we can see that we almost about we've onboarded 300 solution providers. These include both individuals and organizations which are serving persons with disabilities from all over India. We also have a number of innovations listed here. So these include many assistive technology solutions, as you can see. And this is just the beginning. We know we've started to scratch the surface when it comes to providing a tangible solution to persons with disabilities. But what we are hoping is that in the months and years ahead, as we are able to bring more and more solutions onto this platform and amplify it, an Android and iOS app is also in the works, which will be introduced soon. What we are hoping is that every person with disability and their caregiver, which in many cases we found the parents themselves, they will be able to find credible solutions not too far from where they are. The point about credibility is important because, as you can imagine, in a country like India, it's not too difficult to find solutions, but how many of them are actually delivering, how many of them actually work is the moot point. So what we have taken care of is to ensure that all the solution providers that are onboarded here, they go through a process of verification and validation that these are genuine service providers. And as we go along, what we are also hoping is that user experience will itself drive the credibility. So once we get the solution seekers, the end users, onboarded very soon. The moment we reach about 500 solution providers, we hope to open this up to the solution seekers. And after that, also we are getting an AI-enabled chatbot in place, which will help people who may not even have the language, but will be able to use that, including using sign language to get to the nearest solution. So these are some of the things that we are currently trying to do. And needless to say, the whole intent of the Ability Network is to make it into a very collaborative ecosystem. We know that the challenge is so huge that none of us, no single organization can hope to address or solve it for the kind of population that there is. Also, we are clued in with some international networks here, including the Zero Project, which is there in Austria and which is now holding annual conferences in India, Singapore, and a few other countries. We represented ourselves in the last Zero Project conference in both Austria and in Singapore. And we are trying to see how we can also bring assistive technology solutions which exist outside India in a seamless way to users in India, and vice versa. India now has a fairly active ecosystem of innovators around assistive technology, and we are trying to see how those can find a global footprint as well. So that's what we've been trying to do in this very important space of supporting persons with disabilities. And we need more and more hands to come together and join us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chetan, for drawing our attention to this extremely important, almost shocking problem. That the scope of what you just mentioned is, many of us had no idea how big this issue is, but I'm glad that this ecosystem is coming together, and you're right in the middle of this platform approach and reaching out to stakeholders across the system. I'm sure that many people here would reach out to you separately to see how we can work together. Our next speaker on this session is going to be Sonia George, who's joining us all the way from Boston at this very early hour for her. So, Sonia, over to you. You have another few minutes to talk to us about the Global Partnership for Digital Inclusion. Sonia, over to you. Sonia, I think you're on mute. Yeah, Sonia, I think you're on mute. Yeah. No, we still can't hear you. Maybe we'll go to Shalini first, and then come back to you, Sonia. Once we figure out we can't hear you.
Okay, there you go. So the host was not allowing me to unmute. Sorry, it was not. I was trying, but someone on your team just gave me permission, so it's good now. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for including me, Madame, here. And it's been so wonderful to hear everyone else, and all of the themes and all of the points are so connected. So it's really interesting. Thank you, and apologies for that strange beginning. So much has been said already, right? And what I wanted to then, I had some points that I wanted to make, but I changed them a little bit because I wanted to start by noting the importance of the public interest, because you asked me to talk about the importance of targets and milestones for digital inclusion, and how we as GDIP, the Global Digital Inclusion Partnership, work successfully or not in partnership through different activities and different ways of working. And one of the things about targets and milestones, the first point that you asked me to talk about, is that when you think about public policy, which is where we have a lot of these established, one of the important ways in in which we can establish targets and milestones. What happens often is that these targets and milestones are set in a way that is very distant from the reality of people, of communities, of different kinds of things that are happening in many parts of the world. And of course, policy is developed and established not just at the national level, often at the local, at the state level, at the local government level, and then also at the regional and international level. And the reason why I want to talk about the public interest is because it seems like often folks forget that when we establish these targets and milestones through policy, they really are about addressing gaps, right? They're not just about us having an opportunity to set our ambition and where we want to be, but it's really about understanding if that's our ambition, what do we need to address to make it possible, right? When we think about the public interest, we have to ensure that we address some of the problems that all of you, I mean, Henriette, Osama, Shaitan just now, Amir, discussed, which is understanding where the key challenges and gaps exist across different kinds of groups of communities at all of these different levels, and make sure that policy targets and milestones are set with those in mind to address the gaps that they face so that they can be active participants, they can be active users. If that's what they choose to do, they can also choose not to, which some folks insist on thinking about, which is also important. But it's important to think about those in the public interest. What is best for the overall, right, for the majority, when everyone is included? And so when I think about targets, we have to address things like what Shaitan just mentioned, thinking about the disability community, thinking about women, thinking about rural communities, thinking about different kinds of dimensions of our socioeconomic makeup, right, around the world, so that we ensure that those that are not just marginalized, but poorly engaged, because not just because of technology, but because of socioeconomic and cultural issues, can be included and be part of these bigger makeup of what a digital society is. And here we are today doing this thing on a Sunday when all of us are resting because we care about these issues, right? We care about celebrating the importance of an information society and the internet, and we want to make sure that people are thinking about these struggles, these challenges that many countries, many communities are facing. So what I wanted to say is, when we think about targets, we really have to center not just people and communities, but really understand what is the information society, what are the kinds of communities that we want to build, what are the best communities and societies that we want to build in the public interest, not just in the interest of one or another player, but really in the public interest. And when I'm talking about the public interest, we talk about all of those folks that many of you have mentioned. I mean, Henriette and Osama mentioned many, Amir also did, and again, the disability community being so important. I focus a lot on my work on the gender divide, as you all know, and how we think about policy solutions that address this massive gap that is the gender digital gap, and how do we think about switching that tendency that continues to actually deteriorate and give more opportunity. So it's important to establish targets and milestones, not just because it's a way of us showing how we want to define these, not just community, but information society from that perspective, from the public interest perspective, but also because if we don't have very clear targets of what we want to achieve, what it's our ambition, as humanity, then we cannot monitor, we cannot be accountable to ourselves, to others, to the wider communities. And so it's really important that we are very specific and have those systems of monitoring and accountability. One of the things, Madan, that I think is important for us to recognize is that policy efforts around the world have really established these very ambitious and frankly unrealistic targets and milestones for us in the sector, and most of them invariably fail to be met, or they never are met completely. They're always kind of like almost there but not quite. And we need to learn from those experiences. We need to understand, why is it that we're not meeting the targets? What is missing? What are we not doing? What can we do different? And learn from the lessons, not just the policy lessons, but the practical lessons of working in all of these different dimensions of information society, so that we can say, no, maybe next time when we set our targets, policy targets or milestones, we need to think about what's possible, what's realistic. Yes, with a good enough level of ambition, but at the same time be realistic on what's possible. So I think having those not just reality checks, but at the same time thinking about what we want to build. What is the society that we want to build? What are the communities that we want to support? It's really important to establish. And we are more likely to be successful or to have a level of impact that is really meaningful when we do that. Otherwise, we constantly falling short of those targets, falling short of those ambitions, and really not achieving milestones the way we expect. So how do we get there? How do we construct that kind of possibility that not just has a level of ambition that is in the public interest, that focuses on community and the kind of society that we want to be part of and build, with very much focus on humans. How do we do that? Really, it's about partnership, collaboration, and having the kinds of thinking and activities and actions across all of the different elements that need to be worked, from policy to the actual implementation of that idea, that vision of public interest policy, in a way that is very, very concrete. One thing that you mentioned when you suggested some of the points for this conversation is, do we have roadmaps? Can we establish roadmaps that allow us to get there? Absolutely. Having roadmaps and clear pathways to get from one point to another point is absolutely important. And I think that many of us have worked in many situations where that has been the case. And we've had experiences that have been successful, but many experiences that have also fallen short. So again, can we be introspective? Can we challenge ourselves to think better about how to go about doing these things? I think the work that many of you on in these panel and a call today are doing exactly that. The work that DEF is doing, the work that different kinds of organizations that are here present are doing, is precisely that kind of work. The work of not just supporting communities, bringing to communities the technology that they need where they are, but then continuing to challenge to go further and providing better opportunities with what's possible, right? So that's really important. And that starts creating what's a possible pathway, right? What's a possible roadmap? What is going to work for a particular rural community of farmers in a particular part of India versus a different part of Africa where Henriette is in South Africa? What is the difference? And how can we then be very conscious about those differences too, and those experiences, those lived experiences, right, as we all say, so that the policy targets, the policy milestones, the policy guidance can be conscious about those realities, because the policy targets will not be the same in South Africa as they are in India or in Ghana or in Kenya or in Bangladesh or in the Dominican Republic. They will have to be different because they have to address the specific challenges and gaps that each of those countries and communities within those countries face. So we have to think very creatively and very concretely about those situations. What are those gaps that we're trying to address? How can we change, right, the trajectory of the trends that we see, which currently are quite sad because we continue to exclude around the world. The cost of exclusion, the path of exclusion continues to grow, not just in dollar terms, but actually in opportunity. And we need to change that trajectory. So we need to change that trajectory by having, again, very clear understanding of what we're trying to achieve and having targets and milestones that get us there, and partner with the institutions, the organizations, the communities, the stakeholders that will help us get there. We cannot do these alone. No one can do these alone. No government can do these alone. And so making sure that we bring, to use the language that we all are very familiar, the multi-stakeholder approach is absolutely critical in these space, and also in a being able to not only be successful but have really meaningful impact. And so having the right partners and stakeholders at the table when we are thinking about how to get there, how to construct, how to design the policy and the targets and the milestones, but then also throughout the implementation is important. And I want to get back to a point that both Osama and Henriette mentioned earlier, which is you cannot do that without really thinking about all of the different levels of both supply and demand, right? Thinking about not just the infrastructure and all of the needs that are required to ensure that the infrastructure is of high quality, but it's also safe, that we have safeguards for privacy and all sorts of other issues that we need to address currently. But most importantly, at the time right now, and I think that's even more urgent, is to think about the demand side issues around people safety, skills, the ability to use technology in a way that people choose. Give people the power really to decide, and the agency to decide how is best for them to use technology, what works best for their livelihoods, both as workers, as civic activists, or as family members, what have you. But having a structure, a policy structure that allows us to support that system, allows to support an environment where people can make those decisions, have the skills, the knowledge, the information in their language, the content that allows them to get there, and are constantly being supported. So it's not easy. It's a complex picture, right? With lots of different sides and lots of different players. But no doubt, partnership to get there is very important, and a lot of realism based on people's needs and realities is absolutely critical. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Madan.
Fantastic, Sonia. Thanks for bringing us back to ground, sort of. Sometimes we are in so much reactive mode, we're always reacting to what's happening. But as you suggested, we need to look ahead and see what kind of society do we want, and then work backwards from that society to where we are today. So let's turn now to our last speaker over here, Shalini. Shalini is joining us, I believe, from China. She's actually based in Goa, and is going to join us now and share with us some of her views on some of her experience with working with multilateral organizations, the donor community, NGOs, and so on. Shalini, over to you.
Hello, Madan. Can you hear me?
You're on mute. There you are. Yeah, we can hear you beautifully. Thanks. Go on. Oops. Shalini, you just frozen? Oh, I think she just dropped off. Yeah. Okay. While she comes back, I thought we could start with some discussion now. Anyone want to jump in and ask Chetan or Sonia a question? You can jump in. I've been doing a lot of the questions, but I'd like to invite anyone else from the participants here to ask Shalini or sorry, ask Sonia or Chetan any question. Yeah. Oh, Shalini's come back. Shalini, can you hear us now? Are you going to stay with us?
Yes, sorry about my patchy connection. Let me just, hello. You can
Yeah.
hear me, Madan, right?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, so I just, I mean, we've heard so much from all the others, and I'm just going to add a little bit now. I think a lot of points have already been covered. So I'll just focus essentially on how international development organizations have been supporting ICT 4D. And let me go back a little bit in history. And this has also to do with my own experience. So in the 1990s, we started with the promise of fast evolving information and communication technology. And as was mentioned previously about the first Nokia call, those things were very exciting. And initially, as many of us would know, because we've been through this journey, initially the push was to, see how connection could help us bring information that is more precise, bring information in a faster way, in say almost in real time, and I think that moved on, and over time there was then some sense of enabling a two-way interaction of knowledge between users and providers, and then it moved on to improving provision of public services through tech, and then I think effectively solving development problems, whether it was in health, education, agriculture, rural development, disability, and all the things that we heard of today. I think in the late 1990s, I remember that USAID, among all the big organizations, USAID was one where I had personal experience with, though of course World Bank was also involved in it. And international organizations, and especially international funders, were more keen to look at technology because, one, of course, they also had the resources, but they, in terms of just the understanding of technology, I think that was an exciting thing, and they were trying to explore that space. But it was still very much largely debated, and I remember being many times in a spot when one had to explain why an international funder or any funding coming from anywhere needed to be invested in use of technology when it could actually go into the more conventional domains and directly to, say, solving poverty or addressing health issues and things like that. But I think by the time we entered the 2000s, I think there was a greater understanding and more optimism, and connectivity infrastructure had started to expand. We could see button mobiles, starting to spread. They were still not being used by our house helps, but people who were professionals started to use button mobiles. But rural areas were still not very well connected, and this was very much a urban phenomena. I remember in early 2000s, I was working with the World Food Program, and what so-called tech now, it seems so almost childish, but at that time, food aid pipeline management was something that was seen as very sort of useful in terms of technology bringing in some efficiency to that whole process. And yet it was still very much Excel based. There used to be these Excel sheets that we would monitor and we would input data into. However, at around this time, early 2000s, I joined IDRC, and IDRC, as you all know, was the one of the first institutions that actually um, uh, committed to ICT4D as a separate unit, and with staff and resources, and started to work sort of very passionately on the use of technology. It was just a sort of chance and my good fortune that I was at IDRC at that time, and this work had already started, and they were working furiously on telecenters. And International Fund for Agriculture Development, another international funding agency, as you all know, had already started collaboration with IDRC in the late 1990s, because they did think that um, their poverty outcomes, their poverty project outcomes, portfolio outcomes could improve tremendously with the use of technology. Of course, they didn't know how, and that is why they had contacted IDRC. During my time at IDRC, I saw this whole change from, focusing on electronic connection to actually using technology for networking for knowledge, and networking for knowledge to improve very specific development outcomes. In the case of IFAR, it was poverty related outcomes, but IDRC's ICT4D unit was already, sort of promoting, assessing, testing, funding many different types of development related initiatives, which were tackling many different kinds of development issues all across the developing region of the world. Um, During this time, we also saw a move towards, what I call two-way communication and first explorations of e-governance. For as an example, in 2006, the government of India announced uh, uh, investment in 6,000 community center, with that was supposed to cover all of the country. They would be bringing internet connectivity to the village level and use the connectivity to for various kinds of services for the rural society. So I think by the end of 2000, many funders, many other institutions, civil society institutions in the development sector space had started to work in the area, had gained experience in the area. And I think it was by then quite well established that ICTs, use of ICTs for development was not competing with any funding or resources for the conventional domains of development sector, which is health and education and poverty and agriculture and all this, that it had become indispensable, that ignoring technology would actually increase the divide between the haves and have-nots. So it was becoming indispensable to look at technology to solve development-related problems. I think it also wasn't was the time when sufficient experience, apart from evidence, sufficient experience was, I think, also had been built in the sector among various actors to start looking at different ways of using technology to resolve many of the issues, and that I think really sort of helped in looking at very fast evolving technology, because I think by 2010 onwards, or even before, technology was evolving so fast, and from button phones we had moved to smartphones, and then even the spread of technology, at least in the urban areas, even among the so-called I would say marginalized communities had expanded, and people had started using smartphones or mobile phones for livelihood related tasks. So it became very important to use telephones to find work, to get work, and then of course, I mean, now of course in the last 15 years or so, so many other things have happened. So I think if I look at it's just World Food Program and IFAD that I have personal experience with, they currently have, and this started I think about 7 years or 10 years ago, they have dedicated programs. One, all the ICT related experimentation and project related work has mainstreamed into all their conventional development sectors, but there is also dedicated support to and which is a separate line of funding and resources to innovation, to startups, to help technology solution providers to create solutions or work with development professionals in their organizations to create solutions that directly impact their development outcomes. So both kinds of things exist now. And the other thing I think which is very interesting is that though earlier, it was the international funding agencies which showed a lot of interest in terms of how technology and what technology, and invested resources in helping that whole process out. Now we have also many large technology companies supporting development solutions for development. Of course, Gates Foundation was sort of made its entry a little bit earlier, but now we have many technology companies also in there. So there is, in some sense, the resource funding resource base is also kind of diversified, and there is something more available. Governments have also become more aware and keen to now look at ICT for governance issues. So all those things have changed, and now, of course, we are in that era of where everyone is looking at AI as the big change maker, and as though of course so much has changed and connectivity infrastructure is improved and all that has happened. As Osama reminds us frequently, meaningful connectivity is still out of reach for many communities, and that challenge I think remains. As far as success factors for effective collaboration are concerned, I'll just say in my experience, so many things have been mentioned, so I won't mention them again. But for me, I think the most important is between the technology solution providers and the development professional. I think a meaningful communication, a continuous communication is the most essential if we are to be able to harness technology to solve some of the very sticky problems of development, especially for remote and rural communities. Impact assessment, as has been said, as Osama pointed out before, the kind of numbers that we need to look at. Even previously, I can tell you that, and you probably all know it also, that number of telecenters or number of websites or number of handheld devices never impressed anybody in the development community. It always has to do with how development outcomes are changing because of the use of technology. It is not always easy to prove the connection, but yes, it previously also it forced us to find ways to create evidence. And I think the conversation today is the kind of things that is helping us change that and to bring that evidence, very strongly into the public domain to see how technology is very. I don't know whether even we want to, we even need to
Shalini,
talk about
sorry, the audio is
that
crackling
part.
a bit. Shalini, the audio is crackling a lot now. Maybe you can share with us your remarks afterwards as a small text or
Okay.
a recorded message afterwards. It's running out of time also now. Sorry about that. Yeah, but the audio is getting very crackly at this moment now. But thanks so much for joining us. We now need to move on to the last couple of closing segments and come back to some Q&A after that. We have a couple of videos from other people who couldn't join us but have sent us special video addresses. So I'm going to request my colleague Manasvi now to play a couple of these videos. As you can see on the screen, the two people who are going to be talking to us now through video are Abdul Qayyum, advisor to TRAI, and Sally Wentworth, President and CEO of the Internet Society and Internet Society Foundation. So, Manasvi, can we run through these videos and then we can come back to the last final discussion? Thanks. Yeah, Manasvi, can we have the TRAI video and then the ISOC video? Yeah, let's have the audio on this one.
Good afternoon to all distinguished guests and participants. The theme from connectivity to capability building inclusive digital society perfectly reflects India's digital transformation journey. Over the last decade, India has moved beyond simply connecting people through telecom networks to empowering citizens with opportunity, knowledge, and economic participation. The telecom sector has become backbone of social inclusion, affordable mobile services, and widespread internet access have connected millions in rural and remote regions to education, healthcare, banking, governance, and digital commerce. Today, a farmer can assess market prices on a smartphone, a student can attend online classes, and a small entrepreneur can reach customers across the country through digital platforms. This transformation has been strongly supported by government, which has driven policies to expand broadband infrastructure, promote digital connectivity, and accelerate initiatives such as BharatNet, 4G, 5G rollout. Equally important is the role of regulator, which has ensured transparent regulation, consumer protection, affordable tariff, and a competitive telecom ecosystem that benefits both industry and citizens. However, connectivity alone is not enough. The real goal is capability, that is, creating an environment where people can innovate, learn, earn, and thrive digitally. India's startup ecosystem, digital payment revolution, and expanding digital public infrastructure demonstrate how technology can empower entrepreneurship and foster inclusive growth. Women-led enterprises, youth innovators, and rural startups are now becoming active contributors to the digital economy. Building an inclusive digital society demands sustained collaboration among government, telecom operators, technology companies, startups, academia, and civil society. India's digital future will be shaped not only by stronger networks and advanced technologies, but by empowering every individual with skill, access, and opportunity to participate meaningfully in the digital economy. I congratulate Digital Empowerment Foundation for organizing this event. Thank you very much.
Then you have completed your sentence without.
Then you're muted.
Oh, this is an address from Sally Wentworth.
Hello, I'm Sally Wentworth, President and CEO of the Internet Society and the Internet Society Foundation. The Internet Society's vision is that the Internet is for everyone. But for that to be more than a slogan, we have to do more than connect the unconnected. We have to make Internet access meaningful. That means connectivity that is always available, affordable, reliable, and secure. It is a level of connectivity that allows users to have a safe, satisfying, enriching, and productive online experience at an affordable cost. For us, this means connecting people to reliable infrastructure and also equipping them with the digital skills to use the internet confidently and safely. I've seen what this looks like in practice. In the tea garden communities of Assam and West Bengal, young entrepreneurs are running community information libraries, using mobile boosters and pooled connectivity to bring banking, government services, and education to workers who previously never had access to these kind of online services. That's meaningful access. But community-led solutions can't survive on goodwill alone. They need smarter policy, sustainable funding, and capacity building so that people can be safe online. So on this World Telecommunication and Information Society Day, I ask you, don't just celebrate connectivity, fight for it. For the community still waiting, there is no more time to spare.
Wow, that is a very good message. Don't just celebrate it, fight for connectivity. We come now towards the end of our session. Anyone have any quick questions, comments for our previous speaker from segment 3, 2, or 1? We can squeeze in maybe 1 or 2 questions before we wrap up in 5 minutes. And then I want to give it to my colleagues, Arpita and Vinay, to give a vote of thanks and sum up towards the end. Any questions, comments, quick ones? If not, let me just share some of my takeaways from this whole discussion. I would say, if I had to summarize the whole thing, it would be in the 3 E's, which is empathy. We all need to have some more empathy for those who are unconnected and disconnected, underserved, and so on. More education on what's possible with technology, not just keep up with the latest technology, but go ahead of the technology, as many of the speakers just mentioned. And finally, engagement. We need to engage much deeper with each of us, with all our stakeholders, with the broader ecosystem, and then see what we can do for each one of them. So with that, I want to hand over to my colleagues, Arpita and Vinay, for the concluding remarks. Arpita, any comments?
Yeah, so I'll be sharing first, and then we'll be giving it to Maitri. Maitri from DF will be presenting. So again, I would like to thank all the leaders for such a compelling session on this World Telecom and Information Society Day. A lot of takeaways. What we will also do is we will share the sort of session live video, so you could rewatch it. And you can also engage with us productively during this session post the event. In fact, we would also like to offer some of you incentives to join us for the next event, which is the Mixer Book Stage. Many of you who would like to set up nonprofits, NGOs, there is a very compelling session by Matthew Cherian, and we'd like you guys to join us for that as well. We also have something that we're doing on World Environment Day, which is June 5th and 6th. where it's a hybrid event based out of Bangalore, but we will also create a virtual bridge. We're going to talk about green intelligence, bringing together AI and sustainability. And we also have a contest that is running, which is called the Road to Lake Como, Italy. So those of you who engage productively with ideas, with insights, you would have an opportunity to join us for IEEE International Conference at Lake Como, Italy on June 6th to 9th. We'll share the links and details in the chat below. And this is from the IEEE keynote address, which is called Connect the Unconnected. We were privileged to join Craig Port at one of these networking events where we went to a village out there. So look forward to more such engagements. We'd like to thank DEF and all the speakers and all the very best.
Thanks. Over to Maitri now. Maitri.
Yeah. Hello, sir. Can you see me now?
Yeah.
Hello. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madan sir and Vinay. Hello, everyone. My name is Maitri. I'm from Digital Empowerment Foundation. First of all, thank you so much, everyone, for joining and making time for this important conversation. Sonia mentioned a really important point. We are all here because we care. I also learned a lot from the dialogue. But as we conclude, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to explain and share very interesting work that we are going to be doing at DEF in the next few months and engagements. And, you might want to look out for, and you can participate or even send us a collaboration request if you're interested. So to start with, at DEF, we have been focusing a lot on digital public infrastructure. And as part of that work, we have developed a framework called Jan DPI, which is about making DPI people-centric and ensuring that digital public systems that we have right now are locally accessible, affordable, and inclusive. Now, to bring that vision to life, we partnered with Department of Telecommunications, Government of India, to pilot what we call Samriddh Gram. That is a phygital or physical plus digital village ecosystem where we provide integrated access to citizen services and welfare schemes across pillars of health, education, finance, agriculture, governance, livelihoods, etc. The first pilot happened in Guna, Madhya Pradesh, and going forward, we want to scale this model across the country over time. On the policy side, we are also talking to Telecom Regulatory Authority of India and sharing our inputs on how to improve public Wi-Fi in India. And then on the advocacy end, Arpita is leading this initiative. It's called Just AI Data and Algorithms for Communities. It is also active in the UN Global Dialogue on AI Governance, which is happening in July in Geneva. And again, this is very special. I'm also part of this initiative, and a lot of people in the room here are also part of it, Net Chakra. So on the 15th August this year, we are launching Net Chakra 3.0, which is 30 years of internet in India. This is a multimedia book which includes chapters from national as well as global experts, not just experts, but also general public. So the general public is also open to, we open the call for everyone. And these are the people who also not just specifically experts, these are the people who not just saw internet's evolution, but they also contributed to it. So please look out for the learns. And I will also request Arpita and my colleague to share the previous publications, which was 15 years of internet in India and 40 years of chronology of internet. Which we will share in the chat. In October, we have another collaboration with CDTP and Mahindra University, where we are organizing a conference on law, economics, and justice to understand how legal systems shape economic outcomes, governance, labor, regulation, as well as access to justice. And last but not least, we are also again coming up with our 8th edition of Digital Citizen Summit, which is going to be happening late this year, along with its 4 tracks. The theme again of digital public infrastructure, last year it was platform accountability, and this year it's about digital public infrastructure, not just digital public infrastructure, but again, digital public infrastructure that centers people. So it is Jan DPI, centering people in the digital public infrastructure. Again, there is a lot to share, but in interest of time, I am going to wrap it up. But if any of the details that I just shared, if it interests you, please do reach out to us. And needless to say, we will be reaching out to you as we get more closer to these events. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Maitri. Thanks, Vinay. It's always good to end a long 2-hour discussion with some actual points about what's going to happen next. Otherwise, it becomes, oh, that is such a nice discussion. What can we do? What can we achieve? What can we work towards something tangibly? So, thank you, Maitri. Thanks, Vinay, for that sum up. Thanks to Sai, Manasvi, and all the team of DF and MXR and CDPP for putting this together. We hope to do this not just every year, but every other month. We plan to come back to the various issues that have come up over here, such as environment that came up. We're going to bring this up again next month with a special event on World Environment Day and so on. I believe National Disabilities Day is coming up later in October, November. We can have another discussion around that as well. Open to all of you to give suggestions on what kinds of themes we need to have in this kind of a dialogue going ahead so that we can come back regularly, take stock of what's happening, celebrate and plan for what's going ahead, share research, share energy in the chat window in this forum. And of course, when we all meet each other physically, I don't know when that will be, but I wish you all the very best for taking time out on a precious Sunday. Once again, I think empathy, education, engagement is what we all need to look forward towards. Thanks, Sonia, for rising up so early in the morning, all the way across on the east coast of the US, Greg also from the US, Andrea from South Africa, and all my other compatriots from India and other parts of Asia, and Shalini logging in all the way from the other end of the world in China right now. So thank you all. Have a fantastic Sunday and a great in China right now. So thank you all. Have a fantastic Sunday and a great week ahead. Thank you all.